We're going to look at different type of sampling methods today. So a couple vocab words to start us off. Population is just the group of people that we want to get information from. And then the sample is part of the population. We obviously, at times, we can't survey all of our population, so we get a representative sample. And here's just a good note. If your sample represents your population pretty well, then your results from the sample can be extended and used for your entire population. So you want to get a quality sample so that you don't have to do as much work. Here is an example of population and samples. So if we have voters in Poweshiek County, if they're sent a survey and they have to fill it out and return it within 2 weeks, we have both population and a sample there. So our population would be every registered voter in Poweshiek County, and then our sample would be the people that return that survey. So obviously our sample is a smaller portion of our population. Choosing your sample is really important. Like I mentioned earlier, we want it to represent our population. And if our sample doesn't represent the population, there's really no need to analyze your data because you're not going to be able to extend it anywhere. So for an example, if your overall population has 30% female, then your sample itself should also have 30% female, just so you can extend that to the whole population. So a lot of sampling methods are called a probability sample. And probability samples just mean that every person that you're sampling is going to have a known probability. And that probability is obviously going to be greater than 0. So you know you have a chance of being chosen. I'm going to show you 4 different types of probability samples. The first one is a simple random sample, and it's abbreviated SRS, but simple random is just probably what we feel most comfortable with. It's just where every person has an equal chance of being chosen. So you think about like popsicle sticks in a cup and your name being chosen from that, or names drawn out of a hat, something like that. A stratified sample, your population is split into mutually exclusive groups. Remember, that means there's no overlap. So your groups are mutually exclusive, and then random people are chosen from those individual groups. So it's a kind of a combination, or uses your SRS from above. Systematic sample, just like it sounds, there's a system to it. So you choose your sample based off of some rule or interval. So every 4th person is chosen, or every 11th person gets a survey. And then there's a cluster sample. So your population is divided into groups, and then whole groups are chosen at random. So we're going to look at a couple examples and figure out what type of sampling is being done. So every 5th person is chosen to answer a question. We talked about a systematic sample. So being chosen at specified intervals. So this would be a systematic sample because every 5th person, we have a rule that we're following in order to sample these people. I want you guys to tell me what type of sampling is this example. Every junior's name is put in a hat and 8 students are chosen at random. Okay. We talked about a probability sample means that every person has a probability or a chance of being chosen. So we want to know, is this a probability sample? You sample every other senior who gets onto your bus. Well, you have to think about, what is my population? And currently my population would be my seniors. So then you have to ask, does every senior have a chance of being chosen? And the answer is no, because not every senior is going to ride your bus. They could ride another bus, or they could drive to school, walk to school, get a ride from their parent. So it's not a probability sample because not every person in your population has a chance of being questioned. Okay, you guys tell me if this is a probability sample. A teacher gives every student a number 1 through 40. Then they use a calculator to generate random numbers 1 through 40. And then the first 5 numbers that the teacher generates correlates to the students' numbers, and then those students are group leaders. So would that be a probability sample? Obviously, there are ways that we just talked about an example that is not a probability sampling. So we can still sample people without it being one of those four options we talked about before. So one of the most basic ways to sample people is a convenience sample. So it's exactly like it sounds. You sample people based off of convenience, who's around, make it easy for yourself. There's also the voluntary response sample, which is what we talked about at the beginning when we described our population in our sample. So voluntary response is just people choose whether they're going to respond. So if you're sent a survey in the mail or your email, do you respond or not? That would be voluntary response. These two sampling methods are going to be biased. Obviously, voluntary response. Generally, people that don't really have an opinion aren't going to respond. People that are devoted to the topic are going to respond. So you're going to get a biased answer. Convenience, if you're asking something based off of a location, your people in that location are probably going to have a strong opinion as well. And in case you forgot, bias is just you favor a certain side of discussion. When we use one of these non-probability samplings, obviously our sample is not going to be representative of the entire population because there is that bias. Not only can your sample be biased, but your questions can be biased also. So we're going to look at a couple ways that you could ask or see biased phrases. So a really common one is, do you agree that whatever I put here, the school mascot should be changed? Starting off with do you agree really doesn't give you the opportunity to voice your own opinion, or it's at least harder for quite a few people. Also, another one that's a little more vague but is still biased would be like, read this article and then answer the question online. If you're told specifically how to answer something, online isn't going to reach everybody. So think about like our older generation, your grandparents, maybe they aren't tech savvy and they wouldn't be able to answer that online. So you're automatically biasing your outcomes because you don't reach everyone or you don't get everyone's opinion included. So those are just a couple ways to sample, and then looking at bias also, seeing what that looks like.